A key part of programming with SwiftUI is state. Now, rather than start with the computer science definition of state, let's go with something that may be a little more familiar: the dashboard of a car. The most noticeable part of a car dashboard is probably its gauges and odometers. They show the car's current speed, fuel level, distance traveled, and so on, each of which is some kind of numeric quantity. Dashboards also have warning lights, such as the low oil level warning light or the "it's time to take your car to the shop for some overpriced maintenance" light. Each of these lights is either on, indicating that there's a problem that needs the driver's attention, or off. This on-off, true-false information can be described in code as a Boolean value. So the information on a car's dashboard, such as its speed, fuel level, whether or not the car needs maintenance, taken all together, you can think of that as a visualization of the car's state. Now keep in mind, the dashboard isn't actually the car's state, it's just a visualization of it. To see what I mean, think about what happens when the driver changes the car's state. For example, the driver presses the accelerator and the car starts moving faster. The dashboard then updates to show the new speed. So the car's state is how fast the car is actually moving, and the dashboard is just helping the driver understand and visualize that fact. Internal circumstances can also change the car's state. For example, as you drive your car, the car burns gas. The car's state is how much gas is in the gas tank, and the dashboard hopefully updates the fuel indicator appropriately. But what happens if the car's state and the dashboard aren't in sync? For example, what if your dashboard breaks and doesn't accurately show your car's speed? Well, that could be a big problem. You might get a ticket or worse. It turns out this type of mistake is actually quite common when developing an app. That is, your user interface might not depict accurately the internal state of your app. You might sometimes come across an app with a bug like this. For example, the app might say you have 5 new messages, but then when you check, you actually see a different amount. One of the nice things about SwiftUI is that you're forced to develop your apps in such a way so that your user interface and your state is always consistent, and that prevents these types of frustrating bugs. Let's take another look at Bullseye and think about what our app state would look like if we want to display a pop-up alert when the user taps the Hit Me button. It turns out that when it comes to displaying a pop-up alert, there are only 2 possible conditions. Either the pop-up alert is on the screen, like you see here, or it isn't on the screen, like you see here. And what we want to do is when the user taps the Hit Me button, we want to display the pop-up message to the screen. As you can see, at this point our app state for Bullseye is very simple. Either the pop-up alert is visible, or it's not. This is a Boolean value, which means it's either true or false. Do you remember a few episodes ago when you learned that class and struct templates and the instances of those templates have both data and functionality? Well, the Boolean value to keep track of whether or not the pop-up alert is visible is an example of some data that we need to keep track on our content view struct and instance. Let's see how we can do this. All right, so open up content view.swift. And right after this line that says struct content view : view, and before this line that says var body sum view, we're going to add a new property that's going to store whether or not alert is visible. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to start by typing @state. So remember, @state is a special keyword that says this is a state variable, and it means whenever a state variable changes, we want SwiftUI to automatically recompute the body. So the body of the view and the state variable are always in sync. So next we're going to put the word private, which is kind of a best practice when you're making a state variable to say that this variable is private to content view and other objects or other structures should not be able to access it. Next, we're going to put the keyword var for variable, which means this can change. And finally, we're going to put the name of the variable, which we're going to put alert is visible. When you're making variables like this, it's a good practice to use camel casing, which is a fancy way of saying you start with lowercase, and every time you need a new word, you have the first character of that new word capitalized. It's just kind of a coding style thing with Swift. Then you put colon, and then you put the type of the variable. So the variable that we're going to be using here is a Boolean variable, which means it can be one of 2 things, either true or false. Then you put space, equals, and then you put the initial value of the variable, which we want to be false, because when the app starts up, the alert should not be visible. It's only when you tap Hit Me that then the alert will be visible. All right, next up, after this print statement, so remember, this is some code that gets run when the user taps the hit me button. So this is exactly when we want to set alert invisible to true. So we go self. Self is a special keyword that says this particular instance that we're working with. So this particular content view, we want to access something on this particular content view. And what we want to access is dot alert is visible. And you can see that code complete has noticed we have a property called alert is visible. So I can just double click that. And then you can set it to a new value. So we're going to set it to true when the button is tapped. Remember that in SwiftUI, you're forced to develop your apps in such a way so that your user interface and your state are always consistent. To do this, you keep track of your app state using variables marked with @state. Each state variable will have an initial value. For example, we set alert is visible to false. Then, when the app starts up, iOS calls body to get a dashboard based on the current app state. For example, currently the app body returns the basic bullseye user interface but doesn't show a pop-up. So far, so good. But what happens when you set alert is visible to true? That is changing the app state, so it's important that the user interface is also updated so that it's consistent. Well, since you already marked that variable with the special @state keyword, iOS will automatically refresh the body for you. So it's your job to make sure that the body takes the app state into consideration and displays the alert pop-up if alert is visible is true. Let's see how we can do this.
Sorry to interrupt here, but if you're targeting iOS 15, SwiftUI will no longer have a dedicated alert type. Instead, you now create a view for an alert's actions and another for its message. This will look a little bit different than what Ray's about to demonstrate, although his code will still compile with the deprecation warning. There are many ways to get the necessary data to an alert subviews. One of those is in the author notes below. You can directly replace Ray's alert code with that.
All right. So next up, what we're going to do is still in the button. So we have this first bit here is the action. So the block of code to run when the button is tapped. After this parentheses, we have what to put inside the button. So after this final curly brace, this is completing the definition of the button here. I want to call a method on the resulting button. So right after this line, hit enter, and then type in alert. So we're calling a method on the button we just created. And I'm going to select the second option here, which is presented, and just hit enter there. And that will save me some typing. And so is presented wants us to pass in a variable that keeps track of whether the alert is currently visible or not. Well, good news, we already have such a property called alert is visible. But there's one thing. We have to put a $sign before this. And this is because we want to convert our state variable to a binding into the state variable. And you'll learn more about what bindings are in 2 episodes from now. But for now, just know that we need to put a $sign before it. And then the second thing we need to do is we need to pass in the content, which is us returning what alert we want to show. So we're going to type in return alert, open parentheses, and there's a couple different options here for what you want to select. We're going to select the second option, which lets us pass in the title of the alert, a message to display in the alert, and what we want the dismiss button to look like. So for the title, I'm going to double click that. And it wants us to return a text. So we already know the syntax for returning a text, right? We put text, and in 2 parentheses we put what we want to say. So we're going to put hello there. And then for message, another text. So for text, this is my first pop-up. And for dismiss, it wants us to return a alert button. And the way we can do that is we can type in .default for a default button. And for the label, which is a text, we're just going to put text. And inside there, we're going to put in awesome. Just double check you have all the parentheses set up right. If you have everything right, you should have 3 closing parentheses here, for example. By the way, if your automatic previewing ever gets paused like this, don't forget you can hit Option Command P to start your preview up rather than always having to click that button. It's a nice little shortcut. So our preview is still working, but I really want to test what this is working like in the simulator. Again, I could hit play, or again, keyboard shortcut, Command R to run it in the simulator. All right, now if I tap hit me, instead, well, I still see the message because we haven't deleted that print line. But in addition to that, I see a new pop-up that says, hello there, this is my first pop-up. Awesome. Congratulations, you finally made your app interactive. Now what you have done may have seemed like mostly gibberish to you, but that shouldn't matter. We'll take it one small step at a time. You can now strike off the next item from your programming to-do list, show a pop-up when the user taps the Hit Me button. Take a little break, let it all sink in, and then come back when you're ready for more. You're only just getting started.